Hello and welcome to part 1 of our personal review of birds and birding in Nova Scotia in 2025. It's not just about the rarities, but also the sort of birds that we were seeing and where we were seeing them. We did some twitching, but most of the birding this year was closer to home. So we can dive right into January, the 2nd of January to be precise, and another look at the long-staying female king eider at Swim Point on Cape Sable Island. A very welcome New Year tick, and it was good to see that our queen was surviving the winter weather and duck hunting season. Cape Sable Island can usually produce a few interesting winter species, such as black guillemot, straying unusually close to land by Swim Point, and a flyover black-legged kittiwake at West Head. Quite unusual for this time of year were a couple of killdeer by the ball field at Clark's Harbour. And it is always nice to glimpse an American pipit, this one on the rocks at Daniel's Head. Meanwhile, back home in Clam Point, our bird feeders were proving an irresistible attraction for a hungry sharp-shinned hawk. One of the downsides to having active feeders. But hawks have to survive too. On the 3rd of January, Mark was delighted to find this common gull on the ballpark at Clark's Harbour, probably a returning bird from the year before. It was nice to see barred owls too. This bird was near Pubnico. It's always surprising how often yellow-throated warblers overwinter. They are never common in Nova Scotia, but there seems to be one or two that hang about when the snow falls, and they are certainly worth a road trip. This one wasn't too far away, as it was inhabiting a small garden in the middle of the town of Shelburne. We took the trip to look for it on the 4th of January. This is the time of year for purple sandpipers, and it is worth checking out rocky spots at the shore, especially when the waves are crashing. These birds seem to relish this uncharitable environment. This lone bird was by the lighthouse at Bacaro Point. This is also the time of year that interesting geese are found, and a report of a pink-footed goose had us heading to Wedgeport on the 6th of January for a look. It seemed that the pinky had landed in amongst a number of farm ducks and wildfowl in a large garden pond behind a house and was enjoying food put out for the ducks by the very hospitable homeowner. It made it very easy to see. In the same garden, a fox sparrow was taking advantage of some scattered black sunflower seeds. It was nice to see the bird out in the open. The birds that we have in our yard tend to skulk under the multiflora rosebush and so make it difficult to see them. Still, we do have that constant hawk presence during the winter, so it does make sense. Over in Yarmouth, A small flock of horned larks were foraging amongst the sand and scrub of Sunday Point. We don't often get such a good chance to photograph these beauties. Returning to Cape Sable Island, it seemed that the same, or maybe a different common gull was hanging around West Head Wharf. The bird was seen there for quite a while, but not consistently, and some birders had to make several visits to connect with it. It was also the time for Iceland gulls, and the Cumlians type seen here was also at West Head. A female type northern harrier was unusually obliging for photos at the Hawk. A tour of the area between Barrington and Yarmouth on the 10th of January, just looking to see what was about, didn't turn up too much of interest, except for a rusty blackbird under feeder on Roberts Island. The snow made it very difficult for the camera to pick up detail. Alas, the house where this bird was, seems to be no longer feeding. A couple of sandhill cranes were most often seen on the barrens at Southside, Cape Sable Island. They proved to be very difficult to pin down. Mark finally managed a brief sighting on the 13th of January. Meanwhile, the indefatigable sharp-shinned hawk continued his vigil by the bird feeders in our yard at Clam Point. Cape Sable Island came up trumps with another good rarity. This bird had originally been identified as a Baltimore oriole, always a nice sighting in the depths of winter, and the householders had been keeping it well fed on fruit and grape jelly. However, its true identification as a female Bullock's oriole was soon made. So there we were, on the 16th of January, shivering in the yard in the snow flurries, waiting for her to appear. And she did, although she was very active and it was quite difficult to keep the camera focused. Worth braving the cold for though. While we were waiting for the Bullock's oriole, we were entertained by a male northern cardinal and downy woodpecker. Elsewhere, off the island, a red-tailed hawk and a surprising wood duck were present at Argyle Head. The usual sea ducks, such as greater and lesser scaup, were seen at Dennis Point at Pubnico. It might be winter, but there are always a few lingering yellow-rumped warblers around. We had heard about a very obliging barred owl on the Great Pubnico Lake Road, so we set out on the 25th of January to take a look for it. Ironically, we actually came across an owl on the side of the highway before we reached the turnoff at Pubnico and stopped for a look. That was very nice, but we thought we would continue on to see if we could see the other owl. There it was, on the Great Pubnico Lake Road, and it was indeed showing very well. A trip to Metegan on the 26th of January provided a great cormorant, the default cormorant species of the winter. More standard winter species included black guillemot, American herring gull, common eider, American black duck and lesser black-backed gull. February arrived with a bang and an excellent rarity on the 3rd. A trip to White Point near Liverpool saw us standing in the snow in a garden and watching feeders. American robins kept us company. Smart though it is, this was not the thrush we were looking for. No, we were hoping for a glimpse of a varied thrush that had been frequenting this yard. And here it was. Well worth a frozen toe or two. This little bird was very popular during its stay and filled in a space on quite a few local birders' lists. We were very grateful to Marge, the householder, for being so welcoming to the birders and the bird. Back on Cape Sable Island, we were treated to more common birds, although rough-legged hawk is always worth a look. Common goldeneyes, common eider, gadwall and American widgeon were hanging out around Swim Point, as was our Queen King eider, still holding on. And the Sharpie was still in our yard. A pink-footed goose was located in amongst the Canada geese foraging on the corn stubble at the farm on the end of Chebogue Point. It could be the bird from Wedgeport, but we thought it was deserving of a trip down Chebogue Point Road on the 12th of February, where it was duly found amongst the Canada geese. Handsome red-breasted mergansers are always worth a look. These birds were at Swim Point on Cape Sable Island. Swim Point also provided other sea ducks, such as surf scoter, lesser scaup and greater scaup. This red-necked grebe showed very well from Bull's Head Wharf, Cape Sable Island on the 26th of February. They say that March comes in like a lion and goes out like a lamb. There was nothing very lion-like about the female northern cardinal posing in our Clam Point garden on the 3rd of March. Red-winged blackbirds are surprisingly scarce in our yard also. We have already mentioned the sharp-shinned hawk in the garden, but we also often get Cooper's hawk attending the same feeders. Sometimes it seems like the poor little birds have no chance, but they seem to manage. Back at Swim Point, the Queen was still present on the 6th of March, but she wouldn't be for much longer. A surprise for island birders was a tundra swan that pitched down on the ponds at Daniel's Head, Cape Sable Island, on the 6th of March. The bird stayed only for a couple of days and was not relocated. A snow goose had been frequenting the area around the north end of Yarmouth for some time, but it hadn't been easy to see. We re-found it on the lake at Dayton on the 9th of March and managed a couple of record shots. It seems we were the last ones to see this bird. Back on the island, a very smart white-winged scoter was snapped at Swim Point and a downy woodpecker by the feeders in the Clam Point yard. Thick-billed murres are a feature of the early part of the year, usually found around the wharves. Swim Point came up with this individual on the 19th of March. Another bird always worth a look is the handsome surf scoter. Finally, for this part of the review, were a few ring-necked ducks that turned up on Baker's Flats in Cape Sable Island on the 27th of March. So that was the first 3 months of 2025. Lots of sea ducks, some great bird species, even the odd provincial tick for us. We actually seemed to see everything that we went to see. Would that continue for the rest of the year? Now for our book plug. Mark writes books, all sorts of books. This is a selection of birding stories from his 50-ish years of birding. He also writes novels, some set in Nottingham, UK, some in Nova Scotia, some in a galaxy far, far away, many crime mysteries. All available as ebooks and paperbacks from Amazon. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing so you don't miss the next part. What will we see between April and June? Why not take a look at our birding videos from all over the world on our YouTube channel? Until the next time, thanks for watching.